Oop, let me.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's good to be here today, and we're going to talk about having influence without authority and how that connects to your work as an Agile coach and being able to help organizations make change that lasts beyond you. I'm Cherie Silas. I do actually see several people here I know. So hello, good to see you all again. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a certified team coach and enterprise coach with Scrum Alliance. So I'm in the Agile arena with all of you and also in the professional coaching arena. And the big work that I do at my company is focusing on developing coaches in the Agile field. Right? And so people who are Scrum Masters, coaches, managers, and how they can use professional coaching in their work as Agile coaches. And I'm also the one of the authors of the Enterprise Agile Coaching book. If you haven't seen it, now you have. There it is. So with all that, let's go ahead and get started. And so I'd like to put this statement out in front of you and see what thoughts you have about this and what you've seen that maybe is different than this, right? When an Agile coach leaves an organization or an engagement, all the change they're working on, it shouldn't roll back. Right? If you're an Agile coach or you hire an Agile coach and they come in, they help you make a bunch of changes, they leave, your organization shouldn't look the same as it did before they got there 6 months later. It should be moving forward. And my theory that I have actually seen happen over time is there's different ways to coach. One is more compliance directed, and one is more invitational directed, right? And so compliance feels easy. Like you go in, you tell people what to do, you make them do it, and you force that change. And if they don't listen, you tell their boss, and their boss makes them make the change. And within 3 months, you can have Agile up and running, set up in an organization. Yay, we're transformed, right? And then, or at least that's what people promise. Don't know if that actually happens. However, you can kind of get change to happen, a change in behaviors and process to happen relatively quickly if you are a forcing mechanism. However, the challenge is that when that forcing mechanism leaves, there's nothing pushing anymore. And then everything kind of rolls back, or much of it rolls back. You may have seen this happen in organizations. Like, let's say you're working with an engineering area and you talk to the managers and you help them to, like, let's stop telling everybody what to do. Let's stop pulling people off of teams to go work on special projects. Let's put work to go through backlogs so that teams can focus on them. They're all, yes, okay, fine, we'll do that. They were fine. And then they get a phone call from their boss's boss saying, I want something done in 3 days. What happens? They grab people off of 4 different teams and they put them on a special project and say, go do this, right? It's because the forcing mechanism that you were doesn't override the power of what's really happening in the organization and their need to survive. So I'm wondering what you've seen around this in your experiences. How often have you seen change roll back? Or how quickly have you seen change take a hold? And what's been the sustainability of that? Who's got some thoughts?
This is Mark. It's interesting you use the word mechanism because it seems like the more management sees everybody as in a mechanical worldview, then the more likely that everybody's going to be, fulfilling that part of being that cog and not really, I'll do it as long as I have to. And then, and management isn't really invested in anything different either, because the mechanical approach serves them well as well, because that maintains their hierarchy. So if they're not really seeing anything happening, if they're not really seeing massive improvements anyway, then they fall back on that sort of approach. For me, it seems like when the teams have the ability to work as teams and really start clicking as a team and collaborating, then it doesn't matter if you're pushing it at all. It doesn't matter who the coach is. It doesn't matter who the managers are, if they just get out of the way. It's more invitational works and stays, and mechanical approaches seem to get stuck and fall back.
Yeah. And so this kind of compliance driven approach, it's an approach that assumes authority. You might have authority because you might actually be somewhere in the food chain that's higher up than others, but often it's a perceived authority that Agile coaches have in the organization. That's often because there may be consultants who come in from outside, or because they're seen as subject matter experts or whatever. But there's this authority that people believe they have, so they want to listen. I've heard, several times, like, "Oh, the coach is not going to like this," and I'm like, "That has nothing to do with me. I don't do what works for you, right? It's not me." And some of it's out of fear that experiences they've had with coaches mean you're going to go report me to my boss if I don't do what I'm supposed to do. I worked with one coach. It's been several years now, but if the team didn't look at the tool they were looking at the backlog through using a specific filter, he would go tell their boss they're uncoachable, and they would get in trouble. It's like, dude, I don't know about all that, right? So we're going to look at today more about how you can have influence and influence change when you don't have authority, or when you don't try to develop a perceived authority that people feel like they have to follow you without choice. If you've ever seen levels of leadership, the 5 levels of leadership, the lowest level of leadership is I follow you because I have to, right? And that's where we want to get out of. So before we kind of jump into what is in invitational coaching, I also think that it's important that we understand the work we're doing. So I hear all the time, we're doing Agile transformation. I've just recently heard somebody talking about when we teach a team how to do Scrum, it's like, yes, we're transformed. We learn how to do Scrum, we're transformed. And I think it gets pretty confusing to the industry. And I see Peter just laughing his head off over there. I think it gets kind of confusing in the industry. And I think coaches are a bit confused. And so what I've seen is there's actually, I'll classify it as 3 different levels of the work we're doing with companies as a coach. The first level, and I don't want to say it's the lowest level, but it is the kind of entry level. It's focused at the team level, and it's focused on process installation or process adoption. They call you, they want you to come and help their teams do Scrum, or they want you to come and help their teams do Kanban or something along that lines. And when you're in a process installation realm, when they really aren't looking at anything beyond the teams. Right? We want the teams to change. We want process to change. We're not going to change anything about reporting or organizational structure. We may or may not give you Scrum Masters and product owners. Or we know that this Scrum thing is going to save us. So we want our people to work in these 2-week iterations and have daily Scrums, which they usually call them daily stand-ups. And that's going to make us great. Right? And so if we're doing process installation, it's valid, right? And it's one level, but it is not Agile transformation. You're not transforming anything. You're adopting a process and helping people with process improvement at the team level. That work that you're doing is going to hit a ceiling pretty quickly, right? The change that you're trying to do and the improvement that they're trying to make, pretty soon the team is going to feel like they can operate, but then what's outside of the team is going to slow them down. What's outside of the team is going to get in their way, right? Either because they don't have the authority to do the work they need to do, or there's other impediments in the organization, whether that's technical or people or what have you. And it's often like we're doing Scrum, but the rest of the organization isn't. The work's coming in through a Gantt chart, and then we take it and do Scrum with it. Right? And so you get topped out pretty quickly. Agile adoption is kind of that next level of change. And I believe, and what I've seen with most of my experience, is that this is really what most clients are looking for. And this is what most of us are probably doing, even though it tends to be called transformation. So what's the difference between adoption and then this installation and transformation? Think of adoption as you're working with an organization. They really do want to make change. The person that's like the top, that's brought you in, or is the top decision maker in the area you're focused on, is probably somebody like a technical leader, right? It could be the VP of technology or a CTO or whoever. It just kind of depends on what size the company is. It might be a managing director over engineering. You're probably, and they're probably the ones that hired you and brought you in, right? And so you may be working with usually engineering and probably the product organization, or hopefully the product organization, right? And they're bringing in product owners that are actually from the business. In this Agile adoption, they do want to make change. They're okay making changes to the organizational structure to go from like functional teams to cross-functional teams, from like component teams or just individual contributors. They're willing to put people in teams that are more persistent instead of just moving people around all the time. They're willing to let the decision making go down deeper into the organization. They want to adopt Agile values and principles. And so you're able to make a lot of change with this Agile adoption. They want to train and get people in positions of Scrum Master, product owner. They want to be better Agile managers. You're probably setting up communities of practice. Like, there's a lot of work there to be done. The Agile adoption, the ceiling on that is the part where whoever your top person in authority is, it's what they control, right? So you might be working with a chief product officer or a big high up product manager, an engineering person, and they can fully control the budget and the decisions in engineering and in product. And so this is Agile adoption. We can make a lot of change here and we can do a lot of good. And like I said, this is what most people are doing, I believe. Agile transformation goes out beyond that. I mean, think of transformation. If you have a worm or a caterpillar and they're turning into a butterfly, it is complete transformation. They were one thing and now they are something else as a being, as an entity. When you're doing Agile transformation, this is a statement that as a company, as an entity, we are going to change into something different than we were before. We're going to look at the way we build products. We're going to look at the way we think about the way we develop products and the way we design products. We're going to look at the way we manage people and hire people and pay people and our merit program. And we're going to look at our legal contracts, and we're going to change from waterfall contracts to Agile contracts. We're going to make change in our sales and our marketing. so that we don't have salespeople out there selling stuff, making stuff up in their head saying, yes, we can sell it. We'll have it for you in 2 weeks. Right. And then they come shove it down into engineering. You're like, dude, we can't even do that. And definitely not in 2 weeks. Right. And so this agile transformation, they're making whole company changes. In adoption, they're only changing pieces of the organization, and the ceiling starts to come on when you've got, like, if you're just doing agile adoption, you've got the finance group. Right? They're still wanting you to log every minute you're working on a project and log it to whatever things, and they're not funding at the higher levels. They're not funding teams, they're funding processes and projects and things like that. Right. And so you start to get some stuff that slows you down right there. You're putting people in teams to work together, but then you are compensating them for one person to be the superhero. And then you wonder why they can't function as a team, right? This transformation starts to touch in those places. And so I think it's important to understand the difference. Companies that I talk to, most of them want agile adoption. However, coaches, scrum masters, managers, I hear them saying agile transformation. So why is this important? It's important because you are going to be really, really frustrated. If you think you're doing agile transformation, and what they want you to do is just process installation, just teach us how to do Scrum and leave us alone, you're going to be really, really frustrated. And what happens when you get really, really frustrated is you want to start pushing them to make the change you want them to make. You should be doing it this way. I'm here to help you do that. So I'm going to try to force you into things that you're not ready to go into, or you don't have the power, or you don't have the funding, or you don't have the buy-in to do. So any thoughts on this before we move forward? I know this might be very different for some of you.
I personally love this breakdown of these 3 different things here, Cherie. Beautifully spelled out.
Good. All right. So then let's get into why invitational then, instead of this authoritative push, right? First of all, what is invitational coaching? Well, invitational agile coaching, it's a different way of thinking, and it's a different approach. It's a different way of interacting with your client. It's partnership, and it's inviting them to be a partner with you and inviting you to be a partner with them. So when you're a partner with somebody, you're on the same level. They're not above you, they're not beneath you. You're equal, you're partners, you're both in this together. And the reason why this becomes important is because we have to be able to overcome some of these problems that you get, like when we go through things in a traditional way. Right? One of the biggest questions I get from coaches is, how do you deal with resistance? Right? And so going to an invitational approach helps you with resistance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Another different way of thinking when you're talking about invitational approach to working with organizations is client sentiment. There's a difference between the way you are thinking about people when you're trying to like force them or use authority to make them change, versus when you're partnering with them to help them create change. Big difference. And we'll talk a bit more about that. And then we'll talk about this, this other big challenge of why we need invitational coaching instead of traditional ways of doing agile coaching is just simply unsustainable change. We push things to happen, we get done quickly, they want it quick, so we do it quick, and then we leave and they have to call the next person to do it again because it rolled back. It's very frustrating to me as a coach if I leave an organization and then a year later they've just like turned back, right? That's not what I want. I want the change to stick. They pay us a lot of money. We want them to get the value for that. So let's go to this question of overcoming resistance. How do you overcome resistance? Well, my first answer is stop creating it. I mean, it really is. Every time someone says, how do you deal with resistance? Well, stop creating it, because all resistance isn't resistance. It's not resistance to change. It's not resistance to Agile. Often the resistance is to you. Right? They don't want to work with you. They don't want to be told what to do by you. Right? And how do we create resistance to us? Well, when we do things like, hey, I've made these mistakes before, that's how I know the answers, right? When we do things like think that we know more than they do, and we're there for 15 whole minutes and we start telling them what they need to do differently, right? We look at them like, yeah, well, you called me here to fix you. Right? You called me here to fix your organization, so I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it. We come in and we're like, that's broke, that's broke, that's broke. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then we go to managers and we're like, hey, manager, you need to stop telling people what to do. You need to do this and you need to do this. And the manager's like, who are you? Why do you think you could tell me what to do? And I didn't invite you here, right? And so people they're resisting you. They might also resist change. Why would they resist Agile? Well, a lot of the times it's because they don't even know why we're doing this, other than so that you can be successful, because it's your job to make them change, right? And so when we start trying to push people to make changes that we think they need to make, then they get resistant. When was the last time someone came to your house? Let's just call it the mother-in-law. We'll pick on mother-in-law. We'll pick on father-in-law in a little bit. When was the last time your mother-in-law came to your house and started telling you how to clean your house and cook your dinner, that you were like, oh, yes, thank you so much for telling me my dishes were in the wrong place and I'm cutting my chicken the wrong way and I'm cooking the wrong way. Thank you. No, you probably wanted to throw her out of the house, right? No one likes to be told what to do. Why? Because I'm an adult. I had enough of that when I was a kid. I'm an adult. I'm a professional. I've got a college degree. I make 6 figures, right? All these things that people are thinking, like, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've been in this company for 13 years. You've been here for 15 minutes, right? This creates resistance. So number one way to fight against resistance is simply to stop creating it, right? That will take you a long way. Another way to get beyond resistance, let's assume that the resistance is like the resistance that we think, right? They don't want to change. People don't like to change. They know how they're, what they've been doing up until now has been working. Why do they need to change? Not everybody likes change. I get it. So how do we then create positive momentum? Well, there's different categories of, I categorize them, of people who like the level of change tolerance they have, right? There is a thing called change tolerance, and you can only tolerate so much change at one time. And some people like change and they've got a really high threshold for change. Probably a lot of you, because we're change agents. That's what we do. Change is cool with us. And so they've got this super high change tolerance. That's a small percentage of the people and the organization. Then on the other end are people who have a very low tolerance for change, right? And they're going to dig their feet in and they are going to not want to make change, right? And then in the middle here is people who just have kind of a normal, medium kind of level of change tolerance, or somewhere on the scale between the two. Right. So what do most people or most coaches that I've worked with, what do they do when they go and they're like, I'm trying to help this organization change? And that group of people over there don't want to do what they're supposed to do. They're making my job hard. What do? They go focus on the people who don't want to make change. Great. That seems logical, right? If I can just move that, then I'll get everything moving. It's not the way it really works. See that big group in the middle, that's probably 70 to 80% of the people. They're in the middle listening and watching and waiting so that they can decide whether they should go with the change or not go with the change. And so what happens when you focus on anything, it gets bigger, right? What you focus on is the thing that gets bigger and gets more seen. So when you go and you start pushing on these people who don't want to make change, they make noise. And that noise radiates out. And these people in the middle start to get the idea that this is a bad thing. And so guess where they go? They slide this way. And then you're creating momentum to don't do this. So instead of doing that, a better way to do this, or a more effective way, at least I found, is to look for the people who want to make change and who like to make change and focus on them. Let the people who want to make change, the teams that want to get involved, let them get in and do it first. Why? Because they're going to be tolerant to mistakes and failures. They're going to be tolerant to experiments. They're going to make improvements. And they're going to be excited about the change and about the impact of it. And then they're going to make noise. And people are going to want to come over in that direction. Right? And so then you create momentum going that way. Before I was an Agile coach, I ran some big organizations in the banking sector. And my peers used to call me downhill because that's where everything rolled downhill. And they would give me the departments that were rolling. And so the way that I would handle that, because you get a department that they fire the boss and they take everybody and say, you're going to go work for this other person instead, they're pretty mad. They've been doing nothing for a while, then they're under you and you want them to do work. So instead of dealing with that resistance, what I would do is I would take somebody from one of my other departments who wanted to move up, they wanted to learn new things, they had a good attitude, they were excited, and I'd say, hey, do you want to go learn how to do that stuff? Yeah. So I'd put them in that department and I'd work with them, that one individual, and we would figure out what was going on. We'd figure out how to do things faster. They would experiment. They would start overperforming all the other people in the department. And then people would be like, hey, what are you doing over there? And then they'd start going and figuring out what she's doing. And then they get better. Right. So what happens to these ones that's got the high level of resistance? Well, eventually they either kind of come over or they quit. So either way you win, right? They'll either eventually get there or they'll quit and you won't need to deal with them anyway. Because the reality is in this work, anytime you make big changes, you lose some people because it's not what they want, right? They will make a change. The change they choose is to go somewhere else or to do something different. So overcoming resistance, create momentum in the right direction. So what's the next piece here is about respecting the client. So we have a tendency in this field to inflict coaching on people. Okay. So how do you respect the client? One, it's this partnership. You can't coach someone who hasn't agreed to be coached. Right? So I know sometimes people learn these coaching skills and they think, oh, every conversation is a coaching conversation, and they do this ninja coaching stuff. I'm going to coach you under the radar and you're not going to know it, and I'm going to get you to do what I want you to do. That's not actually coaching, it's just manipulating. Right? And so we don't want to inflict coaching on people. I'm here and I'm your coach. I was assigned to you. That might be true. However, it doesn't have to be handled that way. Right? So this is where creating coaching agreements with people and getting agreement. Like if I don't just go walk into a manager's office and say, hey, I'm your coach and I'm gonna, like, here's stuff you're doing wrong that we need to fix. Right? That's not gonna fly. Instead, I go build a relationship with them and I let them develop trust in me. And then they eventually start to see, oh yeah, you are listening to me, first of all, you know what you're talking about, and you're actually on my side and want to help me, not belittle me. right? And then so we can create a relationship. When you work with teams, we don't want to just come in and start telling them what to do. It's, hey, you tell me what you want to do. Let's design an engagement together. What's the work we're going to do together? What do we want to accomplish here? How do you want me to interact with you? How do you want me to not interact with you? Right? Where do you want me to poke in and where do you want me to stay out of? And so that way you build this partnership instead of like this place where you're inflicting coaching and that's more of an authority. Like, I'm here and you can't get rid of me, right? Then you're just going to create resistance. And so when we think about this respecting the client, another aspect of this is that we have to assume that the client is competent. Now, I know this might be very different than what you've been seeing or hearing in the Agile industry. You are Agile experts. That's why they hire you. They hire you for your expertise. That's true. It's absolutely true. However, they have expertise you will never have. They understand the domain they're in. They understand the company they're in. They understand the challenges, the work. They're embedded. You will not know that. You can't know that, right? So it's a mix of their competence to do their job and to know their domain, their expertise, and your competence and your knowledge. And you mix those things together, and that's what creates the partnership. Right? We have to assume that people are competent. And how do you know when you're assuming that people are not competent? Well, for me, it shows up when I start getting frustrated because they're doing stuff wrong. Like, why are they doing that? What is that? What is this? Why are they doing it this way? Right? That is a telltale that you're like, I know more than you. You're not competent. Right? I'm here to fix you. I want you to think for just a moment, right? Think of the way you've been interacting with people and the way you see your clients. And I want you to think for a moment, if you truly see them like they are fully competent, they know what they're doing, they don't need you. They don't need you to fix them. They can run their company without you. They were running it before you got there. They've got the money to pay you, so evidently they're doing something right. And they're going to be there when you're gone, unless you ruin their company, right? So, but if you really believe that, then you would be interacting with them in a different way. So instead of saying, this dummy, you'd be saying, this is really interesting. They must have made this decision for a particular reason. They must be doing this for some purpose. This is fixing something I can't see. Maybe it's something that existed 20 years ago, but it's still in place for a reason. Why? Because these people are competent and they know how to run their company and they make decisions for the best of the company. Let's talk about what's happening, right? You see people differently. People know when you think they're an idiot. They really do. Right? They know when you think they're broken and you need to fix them and you're smarter than them and better than them. Right? And so it's up to us internally to change the way we think about people. Assume competence, and it'll be amazing how curious you get rather than frustrated. So I think the third piece of respecting the client is this. It's prioritizing their concerns. And this is kind of challenging for us as Agile coaches, right? Because if you bring me in as an Agile coach and I know what's going on, I come in and I kind of look around and I see all these things that are not working right. You're not getting the results you want. And I can see, well, yep, this, and this, that's why this is happening, right? And I probably could take all the things I see and create a backlog and prioritize it and be like, here's the stuff we got to work on, right? You can too. And that backlog is not going to look like your client's backlog. It's going to be very different, right? And so one thing I'll slide in here is if to you success is we've got Agile installed and the goal is Agile, we've got to get Agile, we've got to bring Agile in, we've got to do Agile right. That's the goal. We're going to measure Agile. You've got the wrong goal. You've got the wrong mission. Agile is not the goal. It is never the goal. Even if the client thinks it's the goal, it is not the goal. Business results are the goal. And we help them use Agile to improve their ways of working so that they can get business results. Agile might have answers and it might not have answers. We say Agile's not the silver bullet, but then we want to go try to but Agile's the goal. Well, if Agile's the goal, and it must be the silver bullet, right? It's not the goal. Why do I bring this up? Because if we can remember this, then we can understand that it's not about, are they doing a 15-minute daily scrum? Are they doing, do they use user stories or job stories or backlog items? None of that matters. We want to listen and ask them what their concerns are. You want to get a manager on your side and not resistant? Find out what his problems are or her problems are and ask how you can help them solve those problems. You don't say anything about what your problems are. You don't say anything about what you want, right? It's what they need is to solve their business problems. And when you focus on their business problems, yes, some Agile stuff can help that. Some Agile stuff can't help that. Yeah, I will tell you right now, something I have never done in all my years. I'm working with a client and their number one problem was they use Jira and they need to figure out how to get data in it and use it and get reports because they have zero transparency. I spent the first 6 months just helping them figure out how to use Jira. Awful from my perspective, right? But it's what they needed. And until they had that, they wouldn't see anything else, right? And so we take care of that. Now we can move on to the next problem, right? Now we have transparency. Now we have visibility. Now I can show you your predictability and we can start working on that, right? And so when you prioritize their concerns, what'll happen, it's pretty amazing, is they've got their concerns. You've got some Agile stuff sometimes that helps that. We get their concerns out the way. Your stuff eventually rises to the top. But by the time your stuff rises to the top, a lot of it's already been settled and implemented and fixed because it's the stuff you were seeing that were causing their problems. The challenge is that coaches focus on what they're seeing that's broken instead of what the problem is that Agile is solving. Right? Don't introduce process and tools and techniques and all that stuff, frameworks and all that. Here's the problem you have. Here's a couple of things that might help. How might we do something like that here? How might we do something like that here? Well, it's because if it worked in your last 12 environments, same exact problem, doesn't mean it's going to work here. You cannot take an out-of-the-box solution and pop it into a complex environment and expect it to work. Why? It's a different system. There's a different political system. There's a different technical system. There's a different process system. There's a different people system. There's a different culture system. And all of that only your client can know is what you don't know, right? And so you might have the same presenting problem, but you've got 10 different root causes than you had at the last client. And 10 different solutions, that would be a better solution or a different mix of solutions, right? And so this is really why I never try to here's the book, here's the thing you got to fit into this box. No, so here's what other people did and here's what I've seen work, but I don't know that that's going to fit here. And I don't know that's going to work here. So what do we need to modify in order to get something like this to work? And you know what, when you recommend something and they're like, nope, that won't work here, that's okay. Do something else, right? Even when it's something that I know, they're going to eventually have to do. Let's say they want to move faster, and right now they've got their teams set up. They've got like these front end teams and these back end teams and these integration teams, and stuff takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get put in production. And I'm talking to them about cross-functional teams so they can get it all done in a 2-week time period, and they don't want to do that. Well, that's fine. We'll keep going the way you want to go. And eventually their bigger problems are going to move, or this is going to become such a big problem that they're going to be ready to make the change. But if I force them to make the change, or try to force them to make the change, when I go to the next department, they're just going to put everybody back where they were before. Right? They're just going to comply to get rid of me. So prioritize their concerns, not your concerns. And so how do we then create sustainable change? So we've been talking about overcoming resistance. We've been talking about partnership and building relationship with your client, and seeing them as competent. Now, how do you make things sustainable? Well, part of it is those things. And part of it is this: giving them control and responsibility. You can't change them. You can barely change you, or at least I can barely change me. Right? Nobody's going to change me. I can barely change myself. And this is why we go after their problems. Why? Because they take ownership of it. This is your problem, your solution, your decision about how you're going to do this, and you are responsible for doing it. Right? As a coach, I never want to go into an organization and say, I'm going to transform your organization for you, and I'm going to run things and do it all. That is a sure way for things to roll back when I'm gone. Why? Because I did it and I don't work there. They need to make their own change. They've got the power to make the change. They've got the decision-making power. They've got the influence. They've got the knowledge of the organization. I can partner with them, but they have to make the decisions and they have to implement it. I'm not going to go and do all the work for them. I'm not staff augmentation, right? If I was staff augmentation, they could assign me to be a project manager or a scrum master or whatever, and I'm going to go fill that role for 40 hours and I'm going to go home. That's not what they brought me here to do. They brought me here to help them change. So I'm going to partner with them so they can change. And they're going to own it, and I'm going to leave. And they don't need to keep me around for the next 10 years. Now, for some consultants, they'd rather be around for the next 10 years. That's you and your business model. It's not mine, right? And so I want to be able to help them make the change. I want them to be accountable. I want them to be responsible. And I want them to know how they're going to measure success and how they're going to measure progress, not just success. How do we know we're at the end, but how do we know we're making any little steps forward? Right. And so we need to know upfront, some upfront and some iteratively as we go through. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. How do we know it's solved? What's going to be different if it's solved? What's going to be different if we're making progress towards solved? Because remember, problems in these complex environments, you might have one problem, but you've got 8, 10 root causes. So you're not going to fix everything all at once. It's not all just going to magically fix. You're going to make progress in different areas until eventually, hopefully, you've got that where you want it. Another reason to have these measures of progress, not just measures of when we're finished, is if you think about product management. Right? We build our products and we want the ability to say, okay, we've spent enough money here. We're not going to do these other things. It's the same thing with the work we're doing here. We want business results. The measurement is not we did all the Agile things. The measurement is we got the business results we were looking for. And so we may have thought we needed to do 6 other things, but you know what? We spent enough effort, energy, money, time, and we've got the results we want. Let's cut this one and go focus on something else. And so we always want to have a way to measure change. And so it's these two things. They take ownership and we measure together that are going to tell us that we're successful and that we're making changes that are in place. Another part of sustainable change is helping them when we think about them taking the ownership. It's helping them to institute things like, let's say, communities of practice. Why am I going to lead the community of practice? I might get it started and teach people how to do it and then hand it over. But they need to be doing that and owning that and running it, because when I leave, that's one of the mechanisms they've got in place to continue learning. Right. And so we want to set up, help them to figure out, well, what are the things they need in place to make sure that they're continuing to grow, continuing to learn. I often develop coaches, internal coaches, so that they don't need to keep hiring consultants. And then that way they're growing and they're picking up stuff, right? So, yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit of what some thoughts are. I've kind of gone through a lot. So what are some of the thoughts you have?
I have a question about consulting when you're going into a new client or you're looking for a prospective client. A lot of times, especially in very compliant organizations or compliant focused organizations where there's a strong, I'm the president, I'm the director, there's a strong hierarchy, that what they're looking for is a consultant who's the unassailable authority. They're looking for a consultant who's like, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and you wrote a book, but not against you. I don't get that vibe. But there's like somebody like, I want someone to tell me what the best practices are, what we should be doing, just tell us what we should do. And, and they really strongly want this. But what they don't need that, because that's really part of their problem, is that they're just waiting for some higher authority to tell them, Elon told us to do this, quick, everybody, And so how do you make that perspective change quickly enough? Because if you don't, well, in the first place, they may just be looking for that. And if you don't come off that way, they're not going to hire you. But I mean, if you are in that conversation, how do you make that change in their perspective so they can see a better way would be, no, let's work together. I have expertise in what I do. You have expertise in what you do. Let's partner and let's try and work these issues out together. How do you get to that point with clients?
Right. And I think you're talking about in the right spot before the engagement. And if you get in and then you start trying to flip the script on them, they're going to be like, this is not what we wanted. And so the conversations are before, and I would say they do need consulting. Remember, Agile coaching, a big chunk of that is consulting. It's the way you consult, right? There is coaching and training. You're probably going to need to do training. You're going to have to give your opinion on how to do things. If they didn't need that, they wouldn't have hired you as an Agile coach. They would just hired anybody, right? And so it's helping them to understand there's a balance here. And here's the things I'm going to do, and here's what it's going to look like, right? If I'm consulting in an organization, if I think of just like I'm an Agile consultant and that's what I do, and I'm a Agile coach who is consulting. So Agile, just like a straight on consultant, is probably going to do a lot of the this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, fix this, do this, or they might even leave you with a $200,000 PowerPoint and tell you go do these things, right? But as a coach, I'm going to go ask, tell me what's happening, tell me what's broken, tell me what's not working, tell me what frustrates you. Let's talk through these things. Let's prioritize what we want to actually accomplish, what problems we want to solve, and then let's talk about the ways we could solve them. Yes, I've got some opinions, and I'm going to give you some opinions, right? You want to solve this. Really what I've seen is if you keep doing it this way, this is what your problem is, and I would recommend you try it like this. Are they going to listen? Maybe. If they don't, you support them and keep going. If they do, good, you help them change it. So that's part of it. There's conversation, like for me, when I work with them before signing on, they have to assign someone high enough in the organization, preferably a team, but one human is good as long as we can build a team with them that has the authority and the power financial power and organizational authority to be able to make decisions and to make changes, right? Because if I can't come change your organizational structure. You need to have somebody who's got enough power and authority to do that. I can't make a financial decision that you need to bring in training, or that you need to hire scrum masters or whatever, right? You have to have somebody on your staff that can do that. And I'm their partner, and I'll help. They're leading the transformation, not me, or the Agile adoption, not me. I'm partnering with them, and they are leading it because they've got to make the decisions. People don't know me. They're not going to, like, I can't be the authority, nor do I want to be the authority, because I'm the coach. I'm not the authority, right? They're the authority. Let them carry the big stick. And they can, because some changes do need to be brought down from the top, right? There's optimization at the team level, and there's optimization at the system level. If there's not somebody in their company who has the power to optimize at the system level, it's not going to happen. Right? And sometimes that's the PMO person, and sometimes it's somebody else, like a chief operating officer, or just a person who's, a director or whatever in the organization. And so that's something that I require, and we talk through that. And and then I think the third piece is when I start, I do an organizational survey, and we design the engagement. I design it with the executives, with the leaders. Here's the problems your organization said it had. Which ones do you want to solve, right? And how are we going to know they're solved? How are we going to measure progress? And here's some of the things I think we'll need to do that. Are you willing to do those things? Do you have budget to do those things, right? And then we move out from there. So I know I gave you a big, long answer. I hope that was
No, that's great. Thanks. That's good. Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else, thoughts, questions, or even tell me I'm wrong? That's totally okay too.
Cherie, I enjoyed listening to the piece where you talked about with Jira, and I've been there working with teams, and I know it's a bit of a cliche. Oh, you're a Scrum Master, you must be our new Jira administrator. But if the tool isn't working for them and they don't know how the tool works, if you can come in and help them get value from the tool, that starts the trust building. It's like, hey, this guy's helping us. Like, this is giving us value. Like, hey, is there anything else you'd like to tell us that we might find helpful as well? Yes. So I know there's that kind of, that stereotype of, oh yeah, Jira admin, Scrum Master, but sometimes that's your way into the team, into that system, into that dynamic to be able to help them. So yeah, I think that's very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, if that's their biggest problem, like that organization that I was helping, they had no insight into data at all. They didn't know where they were. They were funding stuff and sending people to do stuff and had no idea if it ever got done.
Yep.
So that was what they needed, and so that's what I partnered with them on. Then I was able to move out and start helping them with the next thing that was most important.
And then the next thing, and then the next thing. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Well, then I will, I'll put this information up for you real quick. I would love to have you connect with me on LinkedIn, or if you have any comments, questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to connect with you. And I really enjoy being here with you all tonight. And I hope this was helpful for you. All right, and I will hand it back over.
That was great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Very useful, even for those of us who are not probably at your level of coaching full on organizations. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherie. Thank you everyone for joining.
All right. Is there anything we do to close, or I'll hand it back over to you?
Nope, I made all I made all my announcements at the beginning, and we'll share out that information later in an email. And just check back on the Agile Denver YouTube channel. With the new board, I don't know what their cadence is just yet with uploading any of these recordings. So just check back every so once in a while.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you everybody for having me. It was really great to see you all. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to end the meeting for everybody.